Hey everybody, in today's video I want to talk about something that I don't think is covered very often in guitar lessons and on YouTube tutorials, and it really helps your rhythm guitar playing and with power chords and open chords and a lot of different types of chords, and that is using your finger to mute strings when you're playing chords. It's a really simple thing to do, and I'll cover different types of chords that you can use it on. But before we begin, remember to like and subscribe. That way you're notified every time I post new videos like these, and check out my website scottobryanguitar.com. I have the tab for hundreds of punk, rock, and grunge songs up there and other resources, and here we go. Alright, so for the purposes of this video, I'm going to play with a clean tone. That way you can hear the different notes and the mutes a lot better than with a distorted guitar, but you can use this definitely with distorted guitars and rock style stuff. It's actually very good for rock guitar. So we're going to start with one of the most common rock chords, the power chord. We're going to start with a two-note power chord that's rooted on the low E string. So for this example, we're going to go with a G5 chord. So we're basically only playing the E and A strings like that. And so what can happen a lot of times when you're playing like this is you can inadvertently press down on other frets and ring out other strings that you're not intending to. A very common one would be turning it into a three-note power chord on the D string. That note, or maybe even you're strumming wildly and your index fingers bridge down real hard and you hit these strings and it kind of just sounds like a mix between like a power chord and a minor chord and just doesn't sound good. So if we want to be able to just kind of strum hard and not worry about hitting those other strings, we can use our fingers to mute. So the way that I like to do it is I will play that two-note power chord, that G5 chord, and then I'm going to use my ring finger, this finger right here, to mute the D string. So I'm pushing down, muting the D string. So it really just makes it easier to play these movable chords without having to worry too much about only hitting those bottom two strings. So for example, you can move it up and down. And you can really hear the mutes with the clean tone. When you're playing with a distorted tone, you're not going to hear those mutes as much. And then we can do the same thing for a three-note power chord rooted on these strings. So if we take the three-note version of the G5 chord, we want to play the E, A, and D strings. And this works both ways. You can do this muting technique with if you like to play your chords with your ring and pinky. I like to play like this. And this time we're just going to be using the underside of our index finger to mute the G, B, and E strings. So for example, so we've got the three-note power chord and then the muted strings. Again, you can also play it this way, the way I like to play it, and it's the same thing. So even when you're strumming all six strings, it doesn't ring out. And so the next version of the power chord we have is the two-note power chord that's rooted on the A string. So for example, we have a C5 chord if we're playing right here. And so we just want to play the A and D strings when we're playing that chord. And sometimes, again, we can inadvertently hit strings. So we're going to do a very similar version of that mute here, except this time we're going to only use our index finger to mute the top three strings. So we don't have to worry about using the ring finger to mute the G string on this. We've got enough space that we can do it all with our index finger. And then we're also going to use the tip of our index finger to mute that low E string so that doesn't ring out. So for example, if we want to play all six strings, which most people, like you're not really going to do unless you're wildly strumming. But for example, you can see that we're only playing those two notes. So again, we're muting the low E string with the tip of our index finger. And then we're muting the G, B, and E strings with the underside of our index finger. And again, this can be difficult, but it's something that if you learn right off the bat, it's just going to be your go-to, and you won't even have to think about it when you're playing. And now the next version is the three-note power chord rooted on the A string. So we're going to stick with that C5 chord again. And so this time we only want to play the A, D, and G strings. So what we're going to do is we're going to mute the low E again with the tip of our finger. We're going to play the chord the way I like to play it. And then we're going to mute the B and E strings with the underside of our index finger. So in this version, we're playing it like this. So we're only ringing out those three strings. And then you can also do this version the same way. And sometimes it's a little easier to do the muting version, to playing it this way. with your ring and pinky instead of just bridging your ring finger. So again, we're going to mute the B and E strings with the underside of our index finger and mute the low E with the tip of our index finger. And then this also works well with bar chords that are rooted on the A string. So for example, a C minor. So all we're doing with the C minor, since it's a bar chord and we're playing these 5 strings, we're muting that low E with the tip of our index finger, just like we did with the power chords. And when we move it up and down, we're just going to continue to mute that low E with the tip of our index finger. And so we also want to use this technique with open chords. So for example, one of the most common open chords is a D. And mainly what we're concerned with the D chord is that we're going to ring out that A string. You could hear as I just played it. Most likely we're not going to hit the low E. That's also a possibility if we're strumming really hard. But mainly our concern is that A string. So for this chord, we're going to use our thumb to mute those strings. And I know like a lot of people had guitar teachers that told you to keep your thumb back and never to bring your thumb over like that. And I had people tell me that too. But if you look at like videos of like famous guitar players, like most notably like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix, like they've got their thumb moving all over the place. And especially when you are like playing like major bar chords, you really want to get your thumb behind it so you can clamp down on that chord. And then you're going to be kind of moving your thumb. Your thumb is very movable depending on where you're playing on the neck and what you're trying to do, what form of chords you're trying to play. So I really don't agree with this idea that you can't use your thumb in certain situations to come around and mute strings, and like Hendrix even would play like root notes on that. So for the D chord, we're going to play the D like we normally do, and we want to play the top 4 strings. But we're worried about hitting that A string and the E string. So we're going to bring our thumb around here, and we're going to mute those strings. And like I said before, we're mostly concerned about that A string. Like if you have smaller hands like me, you might have a hard time muting both of those strings while not also kind of fretting that, especially if you might have some like lower action on your guitar. So really the focus for me is not hitting that A string. I don't really strum that low E that wildly, so I'm more concerned with just kind of keeping that A muted. But if you have bigger hands and you can get comfortable, you can really just mute both strings. So see how much better that sounds as compared to. And then the same principle applies for a C major chord. We're only playing the top 5 strings, and that E can kind of get in the way. So I like to just bring my thumb just gently around, and it mutes it just enough so that it's not ringing out. And then you can do it with an A chord as well. And then again, this also applies to any other chords that are like an A minor. Anything where you need to mute the low E, you can just use your thumb like that. So that pretty much covers most of the situations you're going to come across in a lot of rock style music. There's obviously different ways to mute other chords, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. So try it out the next time you're playing your power chords and open chords like the ones I showed you, and try and get comfortable with the idea of using that thumb and the undersides of your fingers to mute things that you don't want to ring out. So that's it for this one. I hope you liked the video. If you appreciate this content, like and subscribe. You'll also be notified when I post new content like this. And check out my website, ScottO'BrienGuitar.com. I have the tab for hundreds of punk rock and grunge songs up there. And I'll see you guys next time.